somebody else. We did run this session last year. It's good feedback from it, as Jerry said. So we're running it again. It is rules for coaches, but it's really rules for anybody. You don't have to be a coach. Athletes, umpires. It's just hopefully as useful to everybody, and hopefully there'll be something along the way that you will learn that is new. There have been some rule changes from the EGM last year, so it's worth just making a note of some of the things that have changed over the last few months. On the sign-up sheet, I think it mentioned that Kayla McCann, who's also on the umpires committee, would be with me. She's not with me tonight. Brenda Ewing from the Domestic Events Committee is with me as well, and hopefully Brenda will help out if there's any questions that I am unable to answer. The Umpires Committee and the Domestic Events Committee work quite closely together when it comes to adjudicating on any rules queries. So thanks to Brenda for joining as well. Hopefully you have a slide on screen, and you can see that as I go along. If what I'm talking about doesn't correlate to what's on your screen, somebody please tell me. But normally these things work quite well. As Jerry said, we'll do a bit of a Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, feel free to stick them in the chat if you think you'll forget about them by the end, or hold on to them in the end, and we will certainly try our best to answer them. Yeah, if you're not sure how to do that, if you're not familiar with Teams, there should be a chat option along the top banner. If you click on that, you can just type any chats in there. I'm just going to put a message into the chat, and hopefully it will come up for you. If you want to ask questions towards the end, there's a raise hand button, which I will show you now. It comes up, and then you can click it again for it to go away if you have a question to ask. If in any doubt, just unmute yourself and shout. That's potentially the easiest way to do it. Okay. We've covered a mix of rules regarding boat worthiness, and we'll kind of move through the actual rules leading up to an event, rules during an event, rules after an event, to show you the kind of rule queries that we get this time of the year. We get a bit of a holiday in domestic events and umpires for 6 months of the year, and around this time of the year, between now for the next couple of months, it's almost on a daily basis there's emails and questions about rules. So a lot of the boat issues you should hopefully be pretty familiar with and know what to expect. As umpires, kind of out there on the water enforcing the rules in terms of boat safety, we'll go through some of the things that the umpires will look for, and if your boats or crews don't meet those safety standards that are in the rules, don't take offense if the umpire on the slip sends your boats back. So what we're looking out for is, when it comes to bow balls that don't fit properly, they're torn, they're cracked, they've got metal bits sticking out of them, there's far too much flex in them. So if any of those apply to any of your boats, we will be sending them back. We used to show a fairly graphic image of what not having a bow ball or a badly fitted bow ball does and the damage it can cause, but we'll not spare you that. These are some bad examples. If you're presenting a boat to the slip that has lots and lots and lots of parcel tape or duct tape around the bow ball, it is likely that the umpire will look into that and see what's going on there. We do sometimes see boats that turn up without a bow ball, so please do regularly check that they're properly fitted. There's not too much flex in them, and they're if they need repaired throughout the season, make sure you're doing that. but I'm sure all of you are fairly familiar with that. Bow balls are generally fine. Heel restraints are a bit of an issue at the moment. They need to be there for most shoes. So I'll talk as we go on where they don't need to be there. The rules have changed. We adopt the World Rowing rules, and then it takes a few years for us to embed them into our rules. World Rowing, we're saying heel restraints of a length of 5 centimeters, between 5 and 7 centimeters is acceptable. They changed their rules last year or the year before to a slightly vague rule where it says, quote, when the heel reaches the horizontal position, the foot should be able to be released from the shoe. And the image that they describe how that looks is with the horizontal line and the red arrow. So there's not an exact centimeter measurement. You won't see umpires coming down with a tape measure and measuring that. But use your common sense. If the heel restraints are very, very long, there is a safety issue there. Please do check the shoes before you let your cruise launch. Don't feel bad if the umpire gives them a good tug on the slipway. That's what they've been trained to do. If they break when the umpire pulls at the shoes, then some people would say, well, they potentially saved a life by doing that. So expect we've trained our umpires to do those visual inspections. Some good examples there where the feet are independent in terms of the heel restraints. They're not looped between the two shoes and they're a reasonable length. We will send the slides out of these if you want to spend your time looking through them afterwards. So don't feel you have to take notes or anything. And this we are recording this, so you can go back and look at any of this if you want to. Okay, a few bits on this. The quick release is mandatory and has been for a number of years. To be able to actually, with one pull, you should be able to release straps and feet from shoes. What we're seeing more often is these kind of cleat action shoes, similar to cycling. We're seeing these more so because the entire shoe comes directly off the foot plate. There's no requirement to have a heel restraint on that. So those are the only times that we will not be looking for a heel restraint if you have those type of feet in the boat. This was an image that was sent to us from World Rowing, slightly new design of boat. I haven't seen any of these in Ireland, but apparently they're becoming more popular. The only thing to really note from this is the position of the impacker slot that's slightly further up the canvas. That is perfectly acceptable and allowed as long as there is an impacker slot. Like I said, I haven't seen any designs like this where that's been the case. But if you see any boats like that, that is perfectly allowed. Yes, bad examples. I'm sure you know yourselves where the shoes are tied between, or they're not tied independently. There's missing straps. We will not let you launch if we see anything like that. Another safety rule around hatch covers: they have to be there. Please don't do anything silly like drilling through or holes in boats to allow Cox box wires to go through. I've been in a position where that's been done before and the boat sank. So just be mindful of that. and taping up hatch covers with duct tape or gaffer tape. We don't allow that either. So make sure when you're traveling to events that they're properly screwed in. What often happens is on the trailer on the way to an event, they fall out and they're left on the motorway somewhere. And by the time you get to Enniscara for the championships, you will realize that half of them are missing. And it's difficult to try and source them at that point. So just make sure you have all of those and they fit properly. Okay, portable flotation devices or life jackets, buoyancy aids. This generally, there's a bit of discussion when it comes to this point. All of the above are fine. Our rules don't say anything around one or other being allowed. There is a bit of thought around the buoyancy aids. Some people would say not to use those in a bow loader because if the boat did take on water, it's harder for you to get out if you're sandwiched in. But our rules don't actually say anything on that. So use your common sense, please, with that. But the British rowing rules and the Rowing Ireland rules are slightly different. So if you are competing in Ireland and over in the UK, just be mindful of that. British rowing says it's potentially just the wording of it. They have said in front loader boats, coxes must wear manually operated life jackets. Whereas our rules kind of says the same thing, but in a different way. Our rules just talk about the buoyancy aid or the life jacket being of an acceptable design to satisfy the safety committee. So any of those on screen are fine. But what it does say is that the use of self-inflating life jackets is not allowed. So those are the life jackets that will inflate if they make contact with water. They are prohibited under our rules. I did get asked a question, was it last year when we talked about this? Somebody said, well, how are you supposed to know the difference between a self-inflating and a non-self-inflating? I'll show you in the next slide. The other point around the manual the gas canister life jackets, if they need serviced, please service them. We have gas canister life jackets that have been lying around in clubs for 20 years. We have no idea whether they will work or not. So if they need service, please do that. The other issue is with those, if there's a leg strap that has to be clipped in, please clip it in. Otherwise, the life jacket, when it inflates, will literally go over their head. So it's important to make sure if your coxes are using those, or you as a coach in a launch, please make sure that they are the leg strap is connected. Those are the differences. If you open the life jacket and see inside it, the one on the left is manual, the one on the right is the automatic one that has a little bulb on the bottom of it. So if you're not sure whether the life jacket that you have is automatic or manual, that is what you're looking out for. It's unlikely that the umpire will ask you to pull the life jacket apart to prove that, but just be mindful of that. But that's what our rules say. Okay, that's the bit about boats and boatworthiness covered. So we'll talk a bit more about the rules relating to preparing for the event and the important things you need to remember. Prospectus will tell you the deadlines for entries, which is always 2 Wednesdays before the event at 7 o'clock. We did play around with that a couple of years ago, moving it towards midnight, but it's very much 7 o'clock. That doesn't make any difference if the event is on a Sunday or a Friday or a Saturday. It's still 2 Wednesdays before. And you have to have physically clicked submit by the 7 o'clock deadline. If you're in there at 5 to 7 and haven't clicked submit at 7, but you're still logged in and working on it, it won't work. You need to have clicked submit before the 7 o'clock cutoff. Otherwise, it'll not go through. Sometimes Tracker does slow down a bit depending on if you're in there at 5 to 7 before the championships. It will be going very, very slowly because there will be lots of people trying to do things. So again, be mindful that you do that in good time. Please do read up what in terms of declarations. Is it online? Is it in person? Are there no declarations? What do you have to do there? Substitutions. So our rules allow us to substitute up to half of the crew. So in an 8, that is 4 people. In a 4 quad, obviously it's 2. Double, it's 1. You cannot substitute a single sculler because you can't substitute half of 1. It does say the replacements come from members of the club or same clubs when it comes to composite crews. The grey area in this rule, and there are some, we are aware there are some grey areas in our rules where they can be interpreted in different ways, and that's something we're looking at for the AGM this year to just make sure there are not 2 ways to interpret things. What we've seen before is a composite crew of 2 clubs. If you say the people or person from the second club are substituted out with people from the first club, that should not be allowed because it needs to remain as a composite. If you've substituted them with people from the first club, for example, it would no longer be a composite. So it should, if you're making substitutions, it should still remain a composite crew. Otherwise, you're actually changing it from what was the original entry. That's something we're looking to just clarify. It's not a rule change; it's just clarifying it. That's what we mean there. Objection to qualification is where, and we get this. Brenda will agree with me on this one. When it comes to some of the bigger events in the year, we get a lot of this. We get photographs. We get all sorts to say this person is not eligible to race at that grade, and our detective skills are put to good use at that stage. If you object to somebody rowing in a certain event, i.e. sometimes people say they're not novice. I know they're not novice because X, Y, and Z. What the rules say around that is that you have to make that objection in writing to the secretary of the regatta at the earliest moment, with a £20 or €20 payment. If you're correct, you get the money back. If you're not correct, the regatta committee will keep the £20 as a bit of an admin fee for their troubles. I would say 90% of the ones we look at, the athlete is actually fine and is eligible for rowing in that crew. So if you are objecting to somebody, please provide as much evidence to the regatta committee as you can, so they can look into that. Yes, okay. Important things for race day. So this covers heads and regattas as well. There are issues every year with weigh-in, in terms of knowing when people should weigh in, how many times they need to weigh in, who needs to weigh in. It's only championship events. So university championships, sometimes will decide to do it. They should. The Irish Championships, there is weigh-in for championship events. If you have 16 crew at the championships, like 16 eights or quads, those coxes don't need to weigh in because they're not championship events. So you don't need to worry about that. The weigh-in time is, the exact wording of it is not less than 1 hour and not more than 2 hours. I used to interpret that as, well, that's 90 minutes then, but it's not. It's any time between 2 hours and 1 hour before the first heat. So if it's if novice eights, for example, is at 11 o'clock, you weigh in between 9 and 10 in your race uniform, which is the race kit that you would wear for the race. That doesn't include life jackets, that doesn't include spanners or stones in your pocket, doesn't include holding the cox box. There's we'll come on to talk about the change in cox's weights as we go on, because that has changed. Race kit, you should be rowing in race kit for regattas, and race kit is what you submitted as your club colours. We shouldn't have Rowing Ireland kit, somebody rowing in a rowing for their club but wearing Rowing Ireland kit from the Coupe last year is a no. Everybody should be wearing the same kit. There obviously is leeway when it comes to head of the river races, when it's absolutely freezing and you're sending juniors down to wait at the start for an hour before the start of the race. That's fine, but there is an observers report from each event. If crews aren't wearing their registered race kit or club colours, that will be noted in the observers report. Blades is the same thing as well. We see a lot of random coloured spoons at events. Not only is that not allowed, it makes it really difficult sometimes for the umpires as well, if they're seeing all these random colours, to actually work out what club that is. So just be mindful of that as well. Substitutions. We talked about you can substitute up to half of the crew. You can do that online up until regatta day. And then on the day, if you need to substitute, you can do that at least 1 hour before your race. What I should have said, I suppose, in terms of the coxing weigh-in, coxes have to weigh in before the first heat of every event that they are coxing. This is what trips people up sometimes, particularly championships. If you have one cox that's coxing men's inter 8, men's novice something, a woman's senior 8 as well, the same cox has to weigh in between 2 hours and 1 hour before each of those events. And where that goes wrong is they realize actually they're out in the water coxing one race in that time frame between 2 hours and 1 hour, but for the next race that they're going to be coxing a different event. So please check the timetable to make sure that physically allows you to do that. We don't make any exceptions for that. The only exceptions we've really made around this have been, was it 2 years ago, where the championship weather was absolutely diabolical and we moved some races from one day to the next, and there was a bit of flexibility around it there. But we should be applying these rules as it is. Once you compete in the heat, you shouldn't really be withdrawing from the event other than medical. There's a €50 fine for that's levied to clubs if you withdraw, but for any other reason than medical. Please do check that the substitution is done. Doesn't need to be on the day. A couple of weeks later, when you're looking at the results, click in on tracker, click into it, make sure that the people that rode in that boat is correct, particularly if you're gaining or losing points. You want the correct people to have done it. Sometimes with the pressure in the day for regatta secretaries, they think they've done it and they haven't. So you want to make sure everybody has the same points. So it's worth checking. It's much easier to deal with it at that stage than to contact the regatta secretary a couple of years later and say, oh, change that because that person didn't race. It's very difficult to sort out at that stage. For coxing, this is the new rule that has gone through. And we changed this in line with the world rowing rules that have changed. If you're familiar with this, it used to be minimum weight 55 for men's crews and 50 for women's crews. And we allowed 10 kilograms of ballast. So that meant for the men's crews, if you were 45, you could have 10 kilos that would bring you up to 55. If you're a woman's crew, you could be 40, that would give you 10 kilograms to bring you up to 50. We've now made it much easier. The minimum for everybody is 55, but we're allowing the increased ballast up to 15 kilos. Who does that actually help? Who it helps is every year, well, most years, we get male coxes, particularly for the junior, maybe the junior 18 events, who are weighing in around 42, 43. When we added the 10 kilos onto that, it was putting them to 52, 53, 54 maybe. They weren't making weight, and we were having to actually say to them, you can't race, you can't cox in your junior 8 race that you've trained for all year because you're not, you haven't made the weight. But with the 15 kilos of ballast, that means anybody from 40 up will be fine. So I think that's where it could potentially help things. The ballast should be kept with the cox in the boat. It shouldn't be divvied up and spread across the boat. Umpires at the start will ask coxes to show that. If it's sometimes it's behind the cox's back in a bow loader, the bowman can just turn around, lift it, and show it. That is fine. We've had instances before where people have turfed it out on the finish line. We will ask winning crews, winning coxes to come and produce that ballast at the end and make sure it is the weight that it should be. So yes, if you have coxes that have ballast, make sure that they're holding on to it till the end of that race. If they're racing again the next day, they can bring that ballast back and weigh in with that ballast. If it balances up to 55, great, they can keep that. But they can't just assume that the ballast that they had from the day before will be acceptable for the next day. If they don't weigh in and you turn up to the start, you're disqualified on the start line, and the umpire will move you off the course. It's not a case of we'll weigh in at the finish if you win. You won't be allowed to race. Cox's ID is another important one. The rules do say coxes must provide photo identification at weigh-in. This is a sticking point every year, and I get complaints from people that say, the young juniors don't have photograph ID, or parents weren't happy sending a 14-year-old down to Cork with their passport in case they lost it. The rules do say they need photographic ID. It could be, it could be a passport that the coach holds on to. It could be, I don't know, library card, bus pass. They need to have something. So what I would say to you now is, if you have coxes who are in that position, who are going to be racing at the championships, you've got 3 months longer to sort it out and get them some form of photographic ID. Birth certs are not acceptable because they're not photographic. We normally sort it out one way or other, but it causes a lot of stress. It causes mum and dads at home running around the house, finding a passport, taking a picture of it, sending it through to us. It's yeah, we don't want you to have to go through the stress of that. There was a question there. I'm going to just read it out. Weighing only for championship events. Does that mean only in July? Correct. Unless the University Championships Committee want crews to weigh in as well. That is a championship event. So yes, University Championships in April could weigh in as well. Only for finals. If it's a straight final, you weigh in between 2 hours and 1 hour before it. If there are heats and then a final, you weigh in between 2 hours and 1 hour before the heat. You don't need to weigh in again then for the final. I'm not sure what you were referring to when you said if 19 plus entries, no need to weigh in, as this is not a championship event. I'm not sure what I said about that. I think what I was saying was the junior 16s are not championship events, so they don't need to weigh in. But championship events, so we're talking junior 18s, novice, club, inter, senior events have to weigh in. Hopefully that covers it. Okay, cool, great. Just a very quick bit about we are talking about umpires and umpires enforcing their rules. I thought it was useful just sharing in terms of what we do, how our umpires are licensed, and what the rules say about that. So our umpires are aged 18 and above. There is no upper limit to that in terms of stopping when they're 65 or anything like that. We don't have that. We issue our license for up to 5 years, but we ask people to renew them after 4, just in case they're sick or away after. It gives them 1 year of grace for that. For new umpires, they attend a seminar, a multiple choice written paper, and do a practical assessment. For our existing umpires, when they renew, they attend a seminar that's at the moment held online, and then they do the same renewal written exam online. And if they pass that, they're renewed then for another 4 years. So that's what our rules are saying about our umpires. Getting crews attached. So crews have to be attached and ready to race 2 minutes before the scheduled start time. David, the answer to that is yes. I'll come back to that in 1 second. Ready to race means layers taken off, in the lane and attached. Okay. Sometimes crews get attached and then they want to spend another 5 minutes taking off different layers and getting into race kit. They should be ready to row 2 minutes before the start of the race. When the umpire gives the 2 minute call, they don't have to wait 2 minutes. They can start the race anytime between saying 2 minutes and the start time. That is their discretion. If everybody's attached and ready to go, if it's a multi-lane, it depends. We might wait a bit longer. If it's a 2x2 river race where there's 2 crews and they're attached, 2 minutes seems like a very long time to make them wait. So often we will get them going, but they don't have to wait the full 2 minutes for that. As a coach, please help the umpire. I'm talking as the chair of the umpires committee here. Please do a bit of coaching with your crews around how to back onto a stake boat, how do they do it, the technique of using bow's blade, all that kind of stuff that you know about. Please do practice with them. If your crews are going out in a bow loader, make sure that the rowers know that actually when they're backing onto the pontoon, the cocks can't physically see anything. So they're almost in charge there. Other tips, like when crews come into the course, don't ask them to make sure they don't go too far down the lane. Otherwise, they spend 10 minutes backing it up and they're exhausted by the time they actually get attached. So all those tips about how to get into the lane quickly, making those small adjustments if they need to, is really helpful. The 100-meter rule is a rule that went out a long time ago, where if there's a mechanical failure or breakage or something happens within the first 100 meters, you would stick your hand up, the umpire would stop the race, we would all go back to the start and have another go. That rule hasn't existed for a long time, but we still get people objecting off the start. It's probably natural for people to object. They will stick their hand up. What will more than likely happen in that instance is the umpire will take note of it. They will come over and see what's happened, but they won't be stopping everybody else from racing. We see a lot of Cox's hands up at the start. I think it's a nervous thing more than anything, where they want the umpire to know that they're not straight. More often than not, the umpire can see that they're not straight and can see that they're pointing at 45 degrees. They're not going to start they're not going to start until they are straight. So we will ignore Cox's hands. They don't need to, so you can tell your crews they don't need to put their hands up if they're not ready. The only time we will kind of take any note of Cox's hands is if there's an incident during the race and the Cox wants to object at that point. They will put their hand up to get the umpire's attention. But again, it's the umpire's decision whether what they do with that. More than likely, they will come over and investigate what's happening and then make a decision what they need to do. But they don't have to. They can continue going and investigate later if they want to. I'm just reading the rest of my notes to just make sure I've covered everything that's important for you. Yes, I think most crews are fairly familiar with the starting procedure of the roll call, flags, attention, and go. We don't really see any issues with that. What is worth telling your crews about is when we use a quick start, which means the roll call isn't used. So instead of calling the crews from left to right, the umpire will advise that they're going to do a quick start, which is then followed by attention and go. When we do quick starts, there will be a slightly larger pause between the attention and go, because if people aren't familiar with the quick start, when they hear the word attention, they very quickly get themselves in order. False starts, late to the start, traffic violations. What you need to know about those is 2 of those and you're excluded from the race. So if you're late to the start and then jump the start, that's 2. You're excluded. If you get a traffic violation on the way to the start, that's 1. If you then turn up late, that's 2. So just make sure your crews know what the procedure is there. Okay, for those of you who are masters or masters coaches, we've had a big push over the last few years of trying to help people get more familiar with Masters, how the Masters handicaps work. And as an umpires committee, we have really tried hard to get our umpires to be consistent in how we are applying the Masters starts. That was feedback we were hearing quite a lot. So what it says on the screen is what your Masters should be getting. As an instruction from the umpire, explain that it's a Masters race, what the grades are, what the handicap will be in seconds, who goes in what order. So that should all be explained to crews as they're getting attached. False starts are slightly different in Masters starts. If there's multiple crews, if the crew that goes first, if they false start, the race is stopped, they come back and they're given a false start. If crew number 1 goes off cleanly, anybody else who false starts after that, so the crew that goes off 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, is disqualified. We do not restart. We do not restart the race again. So worth knowing that. And the umpire probably won't do anything at that point. They will just continue the roll call, continue letting the crews go at the right time, and then just radio the finish to say the crew that went 2nd jumped the start, therefore they're disqualified. And you'll probably find out about it at the finish. The handicaps that I'll talk to in the next slide are worked out for 1,000-meter races, which is the length of our most Masters races. We would sometimes see people questioning the handicap at Belfast Sprints, for example, and the people would say, I worked out my handicap and it's 10 and you're telling me it's only 5. That's because Belfast Sprints is only 500 meters. So if the handicaps are worked out to 1,000, so if it's a 500-meter race, we half it as best as we can. Sometimes halving it gives you a 0.5 of a second, but we half those as best as we can. What we're asking you to do as coaches is explain, tell your crews what their handicap is going to be. Often it's published in the draw sheet. So it'll say this crew's D and this crew's F. You can go and look in the rules and work out yourself what the handicap is. It's quite surprising when crews turn up at the start in a Masters race and don't know what their handicap is going to be. I would have thought, if you're thinking about your very strategic race plan, you would want to be prepared, knowing if there's a 2-second handicap or a 20-second handicap, that might influence how you play that race. But be mindful that substitutions on the day might change the handicap. If there's a substitution on the day and suddenly the event that flips things and your competitor is actually not a D grade anymore, they're now an E grade, or the other way, that could change things. So the example we have there is a women's Masters 4. The grades are D and F. So you would look in the charts in the rules, you would find the woman and the 4 under normal conditions. If there's a strong headwind, we would use the grid below. So that shows you there 340. You would find 340 on the next page. D is 17 seconds. F is 33 seconds. Take those away from each other and you get 16. So that is the handicap. Umpires will count downwards. If anybody counts up, let me know. They should be counting downwards. So if it's a 16-second handicap, they will go attention, go, 15, 14, 13, etc. Second 16 is the go, so that's why it is attention, go, 15, 14, 13, etc. And we'll count you down. If it's a really long countdown, they might not count all of those, but they will certainly give you the last 15 seconds to make sure you're ready. So if you're a coach or a master's crew, do your prep beforehand. Know what the handicap is. If it's vastly off what you've expected and worked out, you can challenge that at the start, and the umpire can double check it. Yeah, so that's Masters starts. Okay, during the race, boys in the race. This is for river racing. This doesn't apply. Doesn't apply to multi-lane, and it's really where these boys plot out the course so it's equal. Boat and oars must pass the correct side of the marker buoy. If it's a coxed boat and the boat or the oars passes that, it's automatic disqualification according to the rules. If it's unless it is a coxed boat, in which case the umpire may use their discretion. What do the umpire's rules say, or kind of this is more around good practice rather than what's actually written in the rules when we steer crews? There's 3 instances when we should steer crews. If they're gaining an unfair advantage over others by cutting the course or taking a better line. If they're causing a disadvantage, maybe they've moved in front of somebody, they're washing them out, or it's unsafe. Those are the 3 reasons. So you might see an umpire, if there's crews in lanes 2, 3, 4, and 5, the crew in lane 5 moves into lane 6. The umpire doesn't warn them. You as a coach feel that's very unfair. We've trained our umpires not necessarily to warn them because it's not a safety issue. There's no advantage or disadvantage by them doing that. Potentially, if they then move from lane 6 out into lane 7, which is maybe a warm-up lane, or they're heading towards a bank or something that could cause injury or damage, the umpire will warn them, but it's not the umpire's job to steer crews down the course. There's in terms of what the rules say around this, one change from the EGM was that in a race the umpire must pass crews to keep up with the leaders in the pack. Essentially, that's now changed, so it says they may pass, because we felt that often there wasn't actually a requirement for the umpire to do that, and there are instances where maybe they don't need to do that. If the leader is 20 lengths ahead of everybody else, there's no requirement for them to do that. So we've changed that so it says they may pass. What's allowed from you as a coach? The rules say no instruction, advice, direction, or coaching may be given. So that means radios, shouting from the bank. That there's this difference between shouting encouragement, but avoid any of those instructions around come this way, come that way, go this way, go that way, because that could be interpreted as coaching or direction. Some coaches we see use kind of buzzwords that are meaningless but mean something to the crew. There's not a huge amount we can do about that. You're probably all familiar with how things work at the finish. White flag if it's all good, red flag if it's somebody's to be disqualified or the umpire just needs more time to investigate something before they make a decision. They may use a red flag at that point before they make a decision and then use a white flag. That's fine. Just because there's a red flag immediately doesn't mean somebody's going to get disqualified. Objections is something people don't know an awful lot about, so this is worth knowing. We've pushed it with the umpires, particularly if the crews are very unhappy at the end of a race, rather than staying out there in the water and continuing to have an argument with the umpire. There is a next step that they can take, which we're encouraging people to use, rather than just getting into a long-winded argument out in the water. So if crews aren't happy at the finish, their hand goes up. The umpire will come over, explain what they're not happy with. If they feel somebody cut in front of them or caused wash, or the umpire will listen to that and then make a decision. If the crew's not happy with the decision the umpire's made, this is what the rules say your options are. So you can protest against the umpire's decision. The important bits are in red, in writing to the race committee. So the race committee generally would be the first point of contact is the regatta secretary. So approach them in writing, not less than 30 minutes after the end of the race. Not a lot of time. So you've got 5 minutes. You've got 5 minutes to, sorry, you've got 30 minutes to put it in writing, take it to the regatta secretary about what your complaint is. There's no fee at this for this, so you don't need to worry about that. And then the race committee will look into that. They'll probably contact the umpire. They'll get their side of view, and then they have to make a decision either before the next round of the event. So if somebody's objecting and saying we feel they should be disqualified, we should be put through to the final, the race committee has to make a decision on this before the final. Otherwise, it's the time is lost there, or not later than 2 hours after the finish of the race. So if there isn't another final afterwards or another heat, they've got 2 hours to make that decision. Okay, overseas events. If you're going outside of Ireland, what the rules say, you have to seek permission before entering the event. Okay, so before you, as you're loading the trailer to go to Ghent, the day before it, that's too late. Before entering, you have to seek permission from Rowing Ireland. An email to info@rowingireland is fine. Brenda, you can keep me right on this. If there's a specific form that people have to fill in, I believe there is. You're nodding, there is. So it'll be on the download section of the Rowing Ireland website. And notify the office of victories as well within 14 days of the event. That is what the rules say. Heads and regattas count. So the main ones we see people going to: Henley, Ghent, London Met, all of those apply. Eights Head, Women's Head, that was last week, wasn't it? Yeah. The questions that we get a lot of are, why do we have to bother with masters and juniors when they don't get points? And I suppose my answer to that is that's what the rules say. So if any of you are feel particularly strongly about that, you have the opportunity at the AGM coming up to put something in about that. But the rules at the moment refer to everybody: juniors, masters, seniors, everybody. So if you've got any overseas events coming up, please make sure you do that. Otherwise, you're liable for a fine. Just covering the championships, because I know we've posted the advance notice and they're coming up shortly. To be able to compete at the championships, your clubs have to be affiliated on the 1st of March. I'm sure that applies. Rowers and coxes have to be registered by the 1st of June. Sometimes people fall outside of that. And the 2 regatta rule applies. So you have anybody who wants to race at the championships have to have competed, and I say competed, at 2 events in their lifetime. It's not in the year, it's in their entire lifetime, under Rowing Ireland rules. So 2 Rowing Ireland regattas. don't leave it to the last minute and enter the last 2 events leading up to the close of entries for the championships. If those events get cancelled, you're in bother. So plan this out, please. And it's at close of entries for the championships. At that point, they have to have rowed in 2 events. Fermoy sprints happens between the close of entries of the championships and the championships. That doesn't count as a second event. Because it happens after the close of entries. Tracker won't allow you to do it. So yeah, be mindful of that. Novice categories is open to those in the first year of registration. Again, we get queries about this, and these are some of the examples of queries that we've had. I registered last year, but I never actually rode in any races, so I should be novice this year. You're not, because it's not your first year of registration. You registered last year, you didn't race anywhere. Doesn't matter. I think I was registered ages ago, but that was when I went to school in England. Still the same thing. It's not your first year of registration. If you've been registered to row or race in England, that applies. Another may be, I've rowed for the last 5 years, but never actually been registered. Then you can row novice if you've never been registered. The rules allow that. Does the two events rule apply to juniors? Heads don't count. And does it apply to junior 16s? No, I believe it's only championship. Yeah, it only applies to the championship events. So, for example, if you have 16s entering 16 quads, that doesn't matter. It's only the championship events. 2 regattas, Rowing Ireland regattas in their lifetime. Most people, it's fine. It's not an issue. Sometimes what we see is it hits novices where they just haven't had where they haven't had 2 races. Was it last year or I think it was the year before? There were a lot of events cancelled, but actually, when we look at how many events were run, there were a considerable amount of events that did happen that people could have entered. There's no facility for us to allow to count that if you, for example, entered Cork Regatta and it got cancelled, and therefore you couldn't row. That doesn't count. You have to actually have raced at it. We're nearly there. I know time's ticking on. This is just an overview of what the rules say about unsportsmanlike conduct. It is there. It's stuck in there at the very end of the rules. So anyone who uses language or acts in a way that could be objectionable to rowers, officials, members of the public may be excluded from the race by the umpire. Generally, this is serious things. This is not something that could be interpreted as maybe causing somebody offense but wouldn't offend others. The instances we see of this are quite serious, often behavior or language. Just be mindful that it can mean crews or individuals are excluded. I think so one more slide on supports. If you have any support issues around rules or interpretation of rules, I suggest that you email umpires at and also copy in domestic events, because like I said, we work quite closely together on these rule issues that come in, so it's no harm to copy us both in. If you want to find the rules on the Rowing Ireland website, you go to the About Us section, the front page, top right hand corner, scroll down to downloads. They're in there. We haven't actually updated the new rules from the AGM yet. It's a work in progress. Once that's done, it'll clearly say on the front page, on the front cover of the rules with the updates, and the updates will be in red, so you'll know what the new updates are. The other point I forgot to mention was around points. I purposely was not going to get into a points discussion tonight because we could spend hours doing that. The one rule around points is really important is if you have queries regarding allocation or removal of points from somebody based on races they've won or competed in and not won, the rules say the appeal around that has to be lodged before the end of the following rowing year. So if you've got until, if any queries regarding awarding of points this year, you've got until the 31st of December next year. If you come to umpires or domestic events in 2-3 years' time and query points, the moment is gone. So that's just one worth knowing about. Okay,